Hello and welcome. Just the other day, during a dinner break at our place of employment, playing around on the internet, the computers provided there, we came across this advert about a certain person who can solve the human condition and save the world. We listened to it intently before we went and found this actual interview, and it seemed to us that this might just be a continuum of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, the Theory of Evolution, i.e. a part 2, because we believe this guy here stated, forget natural selection, don't have to worry about natural selection anymore, and so forth. He went on about Charles Darwin's Theory of Evolution. So we were wondering, okay, how can this supposed interview with this supposed biologist solve the human condition and save the world? Because to us, listening further into it, it sounded like you can totally forget about a creator, young creator, God, Jesus the Christ, etc. You don't need that. This man has the answer, this biologist, to solve the human condition and save the world as it presently is in the state that it's in. So let's have a listen to this interview and we'll comment in between.
It's only amplified the now dire need in the world for a deeper, lasting solution to all of the chaos and suffering in human life. And this deeper, enduring solution is actually what this biologist that I'm about to interview is going to provide us with. He's going to do this by explaining and solving the underlying cause of all the suffering, which is our good and evil stricken so-called human condition. So, I don't care what you're doing, you need to stop and listen to this interview. In fact, I don't care what you're doing for the rest of your life. If you can, you just need to listen to this. Now, the interview is going to happen within 4 parts. Each is averaging around about 15 minutes, which is not a lot when you consider that we're going to be explaining the whole human condition. So it gives me a great privilege to introduce Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith. He's the author of a book which is titled Freedom, the End of the Human Condition. And this is the book here. This is my copy, which I've had with me now for quite a long time. And I take it everywhere with me. And there are millions of people all over the globe who are currently studying, reading and researching through this book that Jeremy has brought to us. So, I'm here to tell everyone that this book has not only blown me away and impressed me, but he has also impressed Professor Harry Prosen, who is a former president of the Canadian Psychiatric Association. He's also one of the world's leading psychiatrists. And he said, I quote, "I have no doubt that Jeremy Griffith's biological explanation of the human condition is the holy grail of insight we have sought for the psychological rehabilitation of the human race. This is the book we have been waiting for. It is the book that saves the world." End quote. Now, I think everyone listening would agree that the psychological rehabilitation of the human race is exactly what this world needs. So, buckle into your seats. This is going to be the most interesting and exciting talk you have ever heard. So Jeremy, thank you for talking with us, and tell us, how does your work bring about the psychological rehabilitation of the human race and end all of the suffering and strife, and as Professor Prosen said, save the world?
Thank you very much for having me on your program, Craig. Finding understanding of our psychologically troubled human condition has actually been what the efforts of every human who has ever lived has been dedicated to achieving and has been contributing to finding. As Professor Prosen said, finding understanding of the human condition has been the holy grail of the whole human journey of conscious thought and inquiry. We humans have absolutely lived in hope, faith and trust that one day, somewhere, someplace, all the efforts of everyone, but in particular scientists, would finally produce the completely redeeming, uplifting and healing understanding of us humans. Now, I know it must seem outrageous to claim that this goal of goals has finally been achieved, but it has. In fact, the human condition is such a difficult subject for us humans to confront and deal with that I couldn't be talking about it so openly and freely if it hadn't been solved.
Okay then, Jeremy, solve the human condition for us. We're all ears.
Firstly, I'm a biologist, and that's important because I think everyone will agree that what we need is a non-abstract, non-mystical, completely rational and thus understandable scientific, biological explanation of us humans. Okay, so how are we to explain and understand the human condition? Understand why we humans are the way we are, so brutally competitive, selfish and aggressive, that human life has become all but unbearable. In fact, how are we to make so much sense of our divisive behaviour that the underlying cause of it is so completely explained and understood that, as Professor Poston said, the whole of the human race is psychologically rehabilitated and everyone's life is transformed?
Yes, that's what we want. The human condition finally explained, fixed up and healed forever.
Exactly, Craig. So, to start at the beginning, I know everyone listening is living with the belief, well, it's what we were all taught at school and are told in every documentary we watch, that humans' competitive, selfish and aggressive behaviour is due to us having savage, must reproduce our genes, instincts like other animals have. Certainly, while left-wing thinkers do claim we have some selfless cooperative instincts, they also say we have this selfish, competitive animal side, which Karl Marx limited to such basic needs as sex, food, shelter and clothing. I mean, our conversations are saturated with this belief, with comments like we're programmed by our genes to try to dominate others and be a winner in the battle of life, and our preoccupation with sexual conquest is due to our primal instincts to sow our seeds, and men behave abominably because their bodies are flooded with must reproduce their genes promoting testosterone, and we want a big house because we are innately territorial, and fighting in war is just our deeply rooted combative animal nature expressing itself.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly. I mean, that really is what I've understood is the reason for our competitive and aggressive nature, that we have brutally competitive survival of the fittest instincts, which we are always having to try and restrain or civilise or try to control as best we can. I mean, that's what I was taught in school.
Yes, that's what we were taught. But let's think about this. And what I'm going to say now is very important, so I hope everyone's listening closely. Surely, this idea that we have savage, competitive and aggressive, must reproduce our genes instincts cannot be the real reason for our species' competitive and aggressive behaviour. Because, after all, words used to describe our human behaviour, such as egocentric and arrogant, inspired, depressed, deluded, pessimistic, optimistic, artificial, hateful, cynical, mean, sadistic, immoral, brilliant, guilt-ridden, evil, psychotic, neurotic, alienated, all recognise the involvement of our species' fully conscious thinking mind. They demonstrate that there's a psychological dimension to our behaviour, that we don't suffer from a genetic opportunism-driven animal condition, but a conscious, mind-based, psychologically troubled human condition. And what's more, we humans have cooperative, selfless and loving moral instincts, the voice or expression of which we call our conscience, which is the complete opposite of competitive, selfish and aggressive instincts. As Charles Darwin said, the moral sense affords the best and highest distinction between man and the lower animals. And of course, to have acquired these cooperative, selfless and loving moral instincts, our distant ape ancestors must have lived cooperatively, selflessly and lovingly. I mean, otherwise, how else could we have acquired them?
Yeah.
Our ape ancestors can't have been brutal, club-wielding, competitive and aggressive savages as we've been taught. Rather, they must have lived in a Garden of Eden-like state of cooperative, selfless and loving.
That's where he starts mentioning Charles Darwin. that our ape ancestors, etc., yet they show a picture of a Neanderthal or caveman.
Innocent gentleness, which, as I'd like to explain to you, Craig, in this interview, is a state that the bonobo species of apes is currently living in which anthropological findings now evidence we did once live in. For instance, anthropologists like Owen Lovejoy are reporting that our species-defining cooperative mutualism can now be seen to extend well beyond the deepest Pliocene, which is well beyond 5 million years ago. So saying our competitive and aggressive behaviour comes from savage, competitive and aggressive instincts in us is simply not true. As I'd like to come back to shortly, it's just a convenient excuse we have used while we waited for the psychosis acknowledging and solving real explanation of our present competitive and aggressive human condition.
Wow, so that's a pretty big statement, Jeremy. I mean, a pretty important point that you're making here. You're saying that our competitive and aggressive behaviour is not due to the must produce our genes instincts like the other animals, but is due to a conscious mind-based, psychologically troubled condition, yes?
Yes, our egocentric and arrogant and mean and vindictive and even sadistic behaviour has nothing to do with wanting to reproduce our genes. I mean, that was absurd. And it's actually really good news that our behaviour is due to a conscious mind-based, psychologically troubled condition, because psychosis can be healed with understanding. I mean, if our competitive and aggressive behaviour was due to us having savage instincts, then we'd be stuck with that born with hardwired innate behaviour. It would mean we could only ever hope to restrain and control those supposedly brutal instincts. But since our species' divisive behaviour is due to a psychosis, that divisive behaviour can be cured with healing understanding. So that is very good news, in fact incredibly exciting news, because with understanding we can finally end our psychologically troubled human condition. It's the understanding of our...
So we're thinking, if the original ancient Aramaic scriptures as translated, or manuscripts translated by Victor N. Alexander, a native-born Aramaic speaking translator, filmmaker, Mesopotamian historian buff from Mesopotamian Syria, who translated those manuscripts into the nearest English equivalent, is true in the Brita in the Aramaic, or Genesis in English, where it states that God created a being in his image, having his face, and gave it dominion over animals, all that sort of stuff, and then moved him on to reproduce, etc., etc., perhaps somewhere in the east, for the land of Nod. And centuries later, a German finds the remains of a cave-dwelling being, or Neanderthal man, hence the name Neanderthal, named after his findings, a German archaeologist called Neander. Then, if there is this first pre-Adamic man created in the likeness of God, the image of God, he looks like God, where he has his face, and this being is before Adam, as we know, in the Brita or Genesis, and Eve, then were they apes? Because a lot of the evidence found and put together has been messed with. They've added chimpanzee or ape bones to it and tried to reconstruct this ancient Neanderthal man or Cro-Magnon, etc., to verify their Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Could Charles Darwin be totally misunderstood, him meaning that, well, it's pretty clear what he's talking about, but perhaps you could look at another angle where he's saying everything had its cycles and everything went through its changes to adapt to the environment that it was living in at the time. So if it was hot in one area, they probably had melanin, etc., etc., so they would burn. Okay, so they'd have this dark hue, i.e. like the black Africans, or they go to a colder region and they didn't need melanin, or didn't have melanin, but because they were covered up in fur and hiding in caves away from the sunshine, the hot heat with the ice or whatever, they had this pale skin. This is just something we're bouncing around our head from what we've come across. So with the Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, etc., proven apes, a certain species of apes which evolved into an upright, walking, talking, intelligent man, or not. Okay, that's what we've got to figure out and prove. Were they cave-dwelling apes, walking on their knuckles, who eventually stood upright to, say, reach fruit or berries or something higher up in a tree? That they were these beings that came down from the trees, walked around on their knuckles, and then stood upright, eventually stood upright and became human beings or modern man, up to modern man. Okay, we'll continue with this interview because it sounds very Charles Darwin, and there's no need for a creator. Our condition, psychological condition, our downfall is sin. They're trying to say, well, it's all psychological condition, and this guy can solve it. He's the only one that can solve that human condition and save the world, as far as we understand. So we're going to get more into this interview.
Ourselves that we needed to heal the pain in our brains and become sound and sane again. As I said, the savage instincts explanation was just a convenient excuse while we searched for the
Oh yeah, we forgot. So, if according to the Brita in the Aramaic, or Genesis in the English, from the original ancient, very old Aramaic manuscripts, the original language of God, the language he spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden, and also the men at the Tower of Babel spoke, the Shana Atika, or the Shana Atika Saplaya of the original ancient, very old Aramaic, Tav Eshret. Then, if that's true that he creates this Neanderthal man first, or Cro-Magnon man first, and then he creates another human being in his image from the dust, from the dirt, or the earth. So there's two separate beings, and eventually, say, Genesis 10, the children of God, the sons of God, the holy line left their rightful place because they saw that the daughters of men, the unholy line, were the unrighteous line. They had no parley with God, no communion with God, etc. They saw that their daughters were beautiful, so they took whoever they wanted, and then that way they intermingled, they had intercourse, etc., and produced these offspring. Because the genetics with the DNA, etc., they're too closely related, they had these aliens, these strange creatures. That's what it means in the Aramaic. That's what he's talking about in the footnotes. They had these strange creatures, these freaks, these hybrids that were giants. Okay? So maybe, and then eventually, according to archaeologists, science, or whatever, whoever, these Neanderthals were eventually breeded out. Okay, but we are the result of that interaction between the Adamic human beings and the pre-Adamic beings, i.e. Cro-Magnon with Neanderthal man. Okay, we're the offspring, we're the hybrids, centuries later. So maybe that, because they supposedly didn't have that Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit of God, according to these manuscripts, they just relied on their animal instincts. Whatever they went through and realised and carried on from there. Maybe it's something like that. So we have that animal instinct, that's why we often become aggressive. Apparently, according to Victor Ian Alexander's theory of the Aborigines that he was working on, a lot of those Neanderthals, those hybrids, have that tendency to be aggressive, to start wars, etc., etc. And until they realise and accept the Christ, then they're not really a human being. It's kind of a strange theory, but if you could read it, you'd probably understand it better. Okay, so yeah, we think this is very Charles Darwin theory orientated. We'll continue a bit longer.
The psychosis addressing and solving real explanation of our divisive behaviour, which is the explanation I'd now like to present.
Okay, so what you're saying here, Jeremy, is that we don't need the convenient excuse anymore that we have some kind of savage animal instincts, because we have the real explanation of our conscious mind-based, psychologically troubled human condition.
Yes, this key, all-important, psychosis addressing and solving explanation is actually very obvious. If we think about it, if an animal was to become fully conscious, like we humans became, then that animal's new, self-managing, understanding-based conscious mind would surely have to challenge its pre-existing instinctive orientations to the world, wouldn't it? I mean, a battle would have to break out between the emerging conscious mind that operates from a basis of understanding cause and effect, and the non-understanding instincts that have always controlled and dictated how that animal behaves.
Yep, that makes sense, Jeremy. So what happened, though, when this animal became conscious and its whole life turned into a psychologically distressed mess?
Well, the easiest way to see what happened is to imagine the predicament faced by an animal whose life had always been controlled by its instincts suddenly developing a conscious mind, because if we do that, we'll very quickly see how that animal would develop a psychologically troubled, competitive and aggressive condition like we suffer from.
Yeah.
So that's basically covering what we were getting at about Neanderthal man's interbreeding with Adamic man, and then becomes conscious. The Neanderthal had that animal instinct that he followed, not necessarily that he was an ape or anything like that, that kind of instinct. It's just this instinct that he found, like that he realised, that he used to survive. Have we ever confused anyone on that one? So maybe the interbreeding left us hybrids or offspring descendants of the Neanderthal man and the Adamic man interaction with that animal instinct, that aggressiveness that we have at times, that anger, that psychosis, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So let's imagine a stork. We'll call him Adam. I mean, each summer, Adam instinctively migrates north with the other storks around the coast of Africa to Europe to breed, as some varieties of storks do. Now, since he has no conscious mind, Adam's stork doesn't think about or question his behaviour. He just follows what his instincts tell him to do.
I.e., as in the case of the Neanderthal man, the example that we gave.
But what if we give Adam a large brain capable of conscious thought? He will start.
That would probably be the Adam, who had the Eve in the book of the Brita or Genesis, who supposedly sinned against God. Like Eve took of that fruit, she ate it, she became conscious, and then Adam ate it because he was offered to it by his wife Eve. So he became conscious, he became aware. In the case of the Bible, they become aware that of something, and that something separated them from God. It caused a wedge between them and God.
To think for himself, but many of his new ideas will not be consistent with his instincts. For instance, while migrating north with the other storks, Adam notices an island full of apple trees. He then makes a conscious decision to divert from his migratory flight path and explore the island. I mean, this is his first grand experiment in self-management. But when Adam's instincts realise he has strayed off course, they're going to criticise his deprogrammed behaviour and dogmatically try to pull him back onto his instinctive flight path, aren't they? In effect, they're going to condemn him as being bad. So imagine the turmoil Adam will experience. He can't go back to simply following his instincts. His instinctive orientations to the migratory flight path were acquired over...
Because he's become conscious. They're not conscious, so they just automatically follow that path, whereas he's become conscious for some reason, and he's strayed from that path. So they're trying to bring him back onto that path, but he can't go back onto that path because he's conscious.
Thousands of generations of natural selection, but those orientations are not understandings. And since his conscious mind requires understanding, which you can only get through experimentation, inevitably a war will break out with his instincts. Now, ideally at this point, Adam's conscious mind would sit down, as it were, and explain to his instincts why he's defying them. He would explain that the gene-based natural selection process only gives species instinctive orientations to the world, where his nerve-based conscious mind, which is able to make sense of cause and effect, needs understanding of the world to operate. But of course, Adam doesn't have this self-understanding. He's only just begun his search for knowledge. In fact, he's not even aware what the problem actually is. He simply started to feel that he's bad, even evil.
Okay, so what you're saying is a war has broken out between his conscious mind and his instincts, which he can't explain, and it's left him feeling bad, or that he is bad in some way, or even evil. So what happens then?
Well, tragically, while searching for understanding, we can see that three things are unavoidably going to happen. Adam's going to defensively retaliate against the implied criticism from his instincts. He's going to desperately seek out any reinforcement he can find to relieve himself of the negative feelings. And he's going to try to deny the criticism and block it out of his mind. So he's going to become angry, egocentric and alienated, which is the psychological upset state we call the human condition, because it was us humans who developed a conscious mind and became psychologically upset. And I should say that upset is the right word for our condition, because while we're not evil or bad, we are definitely psychologically upset from having to participate in humanity's heroic search for knowledge. I mean, corrupted and fallen have been used to describe our condition, but they have a sort of negative connotation that we can now appreciate is not deserved. So upset's the better word. Okay, so Adam's intellect or ego, ego being just another word for the intellect, since the dictionary defines ego as the conscious thinking self. So Adam's ego became centered or focused on the need to justify itself. Adam became egocentric, selfishly, preoccupied, aggressively, competing for opportunities to prove he's good and not bad, to validate his worth, to get a win, to essentially eke out any positive reinforcement that would bring him some relief from his criticising instincts. He unavoidably became self-preoccupied or selfish and aggressive and competitive. Okay, so Our selfish, competitive and aggressive behaviour is not due to savage instincts, but to a psychologically upset state or condition.
So he would be saying that if the Neanderthal man had those natural instincts or those animal instincts to do this and that in order to survive, to live on, it's something else that's caused it. Did these Neanderthal men have a conscience? Did they do something like Adam and Eve that brought it on? Or did they just basically follow their natural instinct, animal instinct? Didn't really think about anything. It's just they weren't really conscious of anything. They just did what appeared natural to survive, to live on. Whereas Adam and Eve, apparently they became conscious because of the commandments they broke when they ate that fruit or that forbidden fruit or whatever they did. They became conscious. They became aware of something, be it separation, the sudden loss of covering, protection by God, that there was a wedge placed between them because of that transgression, that sin. They broke that command. They were told not to touch a certain tree or fruit in the middle of the garden, but apparently the serpent came along and beguiled Eve to eat, telling her they could be wise, that telling them some truth, but behind it was a lie. Okay, and then they happened to Adam, etc., etc. So they became conscious, whereas the Neanderthal man didn't. Okay, he's like animals. Animals just eat the leaves of the tree, the bark, the fruit, the grass, whatever, right? It's just something they do. But this Adam became aware, so he ended up with this. He was conscious, so he became aware that he had a choice. Okay, knowing good and evil, he knew, well, if I do this, this is sinful, this has consequences, but if I do this which is righteous, this which is good, that also has consequences, but in relationship to God, who supposedly knows everything, right? And he warns them throughout history, don't do this, don't do that, I know better than you because I'm your creator, and these are the consequences. I'm trying to tell you beforehand, before you fall into that trap, right? Set you by, say, the serpent or the devil. Okay, therefore be warned if you do this, if you do that, if you go against what I command you, well, there'll be consequences for you. You'll die and you'll suffer. You'll pay for those. You'll pay those consequences, etc., etc. Along those sort of lines. Okay, so we're going to go back to this for a little bit longer. We're trying to figure it out now.
So basically, suffering psychological upset was the price we conscious humans had to be prepared to pay for our heroic search for understanding. In the words of the song The Impossible Dream, from the musical The Man of La Mancha, we had to be prepared to march into hell for a heavenly cause. We had to lose ourselves to find ourselves. We had to suffer becoming angry.
Okay, yeah, so there you go. There's that Christian, that God-like aspect. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. You have to die to yourself in order to live. The life is through Christ. Death is through sin. It's all payback, all wages, right? All the consequences for sin is death, eternal oblivion, etc., etc. But if you do if you become righteous, if you become one with God, the Creator, etc., etc., well, your consequence or your reward is eternal life with Him in His kingdom, in His paradise, etc., etc., as far as the Bible texts go. Okay, so we could continue on with this for a little bit longer.
And egocentric until we found sufficient knowledge to explain ourselves.
Wow, Jeremy. I mean, this is just fascinating. So, Adam Stork, we humans, developed a conscious mind and unavoidably started warring with our own instincts. An upsetting war which, well, could only end when we could explain and understand why we had to defy our instincts, which is the understanding that you have just supplied, yes?
Exactly. Remember, Adam Stork became defensively angry, egocentric and alienated because he couldn't explain why he was defying his instincts. And so now that we can explain why, those defensive behaviours are no longer needed and can end.
Okay, so it could be in relation to what Paul, in one of his letters in Romans, etc., wrote. I strive to do that which is righteous or that which is good, but I keep doing that which is unrighteous, abominable, sinful. And he's trying to figure out why. It sounds like he's trying to figure out why. And the only solution he had to overcome all of that was his faith, hope, trust in Christ. Though he never met him, he supposedly had this vision. And I guess he was told by other disciples, apostles, that were of the faith, everything he needed to know. Okay? So he became God conscious. He went from a persecutor, a murderer of Christians or Jews, those of that religious sect that were following Christ, as he was supposedly a Pharisee, etc. And then he became this righteous being after he had this vision of Christ. I'm thinking it's something along those lines. This is what this man is trying to say. It's all psychological. We're asking ourselves, why are we like that? Why do we war against our instincts? Why do we war against good and bad? The good and the bad within us? Why do we lose it? Psychologically, get angry for no apparent reason, want to fight someone, want to go to war, etc., etc. That's what we think he's trying to get at, but he's using psychological reasoning, science, etc. and ignoring the Creator, a God, the God, or Jesus Christ as a solution, because it's all Charles Darwin, theory of evolution, etc. orientated. That's just what we're assuming. Okay, so if you want to watch this interview yourself to come to your own understanding, we can leave the link below this video. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, add your comments below the video. We'll get back to you on those as soon as possible, as soon as we can. Give us a like and then go share this video and information about this interview and how this guy, this Australian biologist, can solve the human condition and save the world. Okay, so he's like the new theory of evolution based saviour, Messiah, deliverer. Thank you for taking the time to watch our latest video creation and upload. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope it made you think long and hard about why we are the way we are.
So that's basically all there is to explain. That's the biological explanation of the human condition. That so explains us that, as Professor Prosen said, it brings about the psychological rehabilitation of the human race.